In 2006, the Argentine women's football team, they did the impossible. A squad of, well, essentially unpaid part-time amateurs stepped onto the pitch and actually beat mighty Brazil to become champions of South America.
Right. It was just this miracle of raw passion.
Exactly. But then, exactly 1 year later, that same team stepped onto the World Cup stage in China, carrying the hopes of a continent, and they lost to Germany. 11-0.
Yeah, it's a brutal reality check.
It really is. Today, we are exploring the absolute whiplash of that reality. I mean, have you ever had to fight tooth and nail just to prove you deserve to be in the room, only to realize the room is, completely rigged against you?
It's an incredibly isolating position to be in. You find yourself in a scenario where your biggest opponent isn't actually the team wearing the other jersey. Your biggest opponent is the very system that is supposed to be supporting you.
And that is the core tension we are pulling apart today. In this deep dive, we are looking at the dramatic, frustrating, and just fiercely resilient journey of the Argentina women's national football team, affectionately known as La Albiceleste.
Which is such a great nickname.
It is. We are tracing their path from experiencing literal systemic neglect all the way to a stunning recent resurgence. We've got a comprehensive historical overview of the team's entire timeline, along with a deeply detailed recent tactical report breaking down their qualifying matches for the 2027 World Cup.
And this isn't just a sports story, right? It is a masterclass in how you build a foundation when the ground underneath you keeps shifting, disappearing, and, reappearing.
Okay, let's unpack this. To really understand where the team is today, holding a ticket to the 2027 World Cup, we have to grasp the immense systemic gravity they've had to pull themselves out of.
Absolutely.
And the defining context here, historically, is that women's football in Argentina has lived in a total eclipse. It has been entirely in the shadow of the men's game.
Which is saying something, considering the Argentine men's team is a global, multi-billion-dollar cultural juggernaut. But the sources point out an even deeper layer of marginalization here. Within the landscape of women's sports in Argentina, football, historically, hasn't even been the most popular choice for female athletes.
Oh, wait, really?
Yeah, if you were a young, athletic girl in Argentina a couple of decades ago, you were far more likely to be steered toward field hockey or volleyball.
Wow.
Because those sports actually receive the funding, the development programs, and the fan support.
So they're fighting a two-front war for relevance. They are overshadowed by Maradona and Messi on one side, and they are overshadowed by their own country's Olympic field hockey stars on the other.
Precisely.
And this lack of attention translates to a very stark economic reality. Our sources note that almost all the players on the women's national football team were entirely amateur until 1991.
And 1991 is when the Campeonato de Fútbol Femenino was founded. But let's be clear about what that actually was.
Let's clarify that.
It was created merely to try and drum up some basic popularity for the sport among women. It was not a professional apparatus at all.
I think people hear the phrase national team and just assume a baseline level of international glamour, right? But the sources highlight a brutal contrast with their biggest rival. We all know the legendary Argentina-Brazil rivalry on the men's side.
Oh, of course.
But historically, on the women's side, there is no comparison. Brazil has had a highly competitive, professionalized women's league for years and years. Argentina didn't introduce a professional women's league until 2019.
Think about the compounding interest of that gap.
Yeah.
For decades, Brazilian players were training full-time, sleeping 8 hours, recovering with professional medical staff, and, studying tactical film.
While the Argentine players were doing what?
Well, meanwhile, the Argentine players were working full-time jobs at bakeries or offices, paying for their own bus fare to get to practice, and basically playing purely on fumes and passion.
Which leads us to what has to be the most baffling moment in their history. In 2016, the Argentina women's national team effectively ceased to exist.
Just gone.
The federation officials just turned off the lights. They were solely focused on investing in the men's side, so they just let the women's program vanish entirely.
Yeah.
Now, if this were a business, you might say, well, they restructured. But in international sports, it feels more like a company completely shutting down its vital R&D department right when global competitors are heavily scaling up, leaving the employees to fend for themselves. When you shut down a national team for 2 years, you aren't just missing a few games on the calendar. Right. You are severing the lineage, right?
What's fascinating here is how institutional neglect creates a biological and tactical disadvantage. You hit the nail on the head with the R&D metaphor.
Right.
Because the transfer of knowledge is everything in team sports. The 19-year-old rookie learns how to manage her nerves in a hostile away game by watching the 32-year-old captain. When a team goes dormant, that bridge just collapses.
Right.
You lose entire generations of tactical development. You are forcing the next group of players to start from absolute zero while your global opponents are already at, like, mile 20 of a marathon.
And when they finally did flip the lights back on, the friction was immense. Building a program back from zero is messy. Even very recently, there have been massive growing pains. Like in May of 2024, 4 players, Lorena Benitez, Julieta Cruz, Lorena Oliveros, and Eliana Stabile, they withdrew from the national team.
Right, and the reports outline that this withdrawal was rooted in a dispute with the Argentine Football Association regarding a lack of basic pay, perceived mistreatment, and just ongoing structural injustices.
Now, obviously, it's a complex internal dispute, and we are just looking at the facts on the ground to understand the team's environment. We aren't taking any sides here. But the main takeaway for you as the listener is the immense daily friction these athletes still face. They are expected to perform at an elite global standard, while simultaneously having to fight fundamental behind-the-scenes battles just for baseline professional treatment. Though it is definitely worth noting that Eliana Stabile did later reconsider her decision and return to the squad.
It perfectly illustrates the psychological load they carry, you know. They aren't just footballers. They're constantly having to act as activists for their own right to play.
And that psychological load, combined with this erratic start-and-stop institutional support, completely explains the on-field results we see in the historical overview. I mean, the team's record over the last few decades is a total roller coaster.
A roller coaster with extreme, almost unbelievable variance.
Yeah.
They swing from massive historic triumphs to absolutely crushing, historically bad defeats, sometimes literally within months of each other.
Let's look at that incredible variance. In 1995, just a few years after that amateur league was formed, they achieved their biggest win on record. They beat Bolivia 12-0.
Which demonstrates that the raw, natural talent and attacking flair in Argentina has always existed. The cultural DNA for football is clearly there.
And then we get the true miracle. The 2006 Copa América Femenina. Between 2005 and 2007, this squad goes on an incredible 14-match undefeated run.
It's wild.
It culminates in the 2006 tournament where they face Brazil in the final. Now remember, this is a professionalized Brazilian program, and Argentina wins 2-0.
Just amazing.
They become the champions of South America, which also earns them their first ever Olympic appearance in 2008.
Beating a professional system with a largely amateur squad is nothing short of heroic. It really is a testament to sheer, unadulterated passion and grit overriding structural disadvantages in a single 90-minute window.
But wait, I don't get that. If they just beat Brazil, a team with pro infrastructure, why do they suddenly completely collapse a year later? Because with that 2006 title, they go to the 2007 World Cup in China, and it is a bloodbath. They lose all their matches, including that devastating 11-0 defeat to Germany. I mean, did they just give up? Did the pressure get to them?
It looks like a sudden mental collapse on paper, but it's actually a physiological and tactical inevitability.
Really?
Yeah, passion has a very strict time limit.
Explain that to me. How does an 11-0 even happen mechanically?
Okay, so grit, passion, and raw talent can win you a regional tournament. In a one-off match against a familiar rival like Brazil, emotional adrenaline can push a player to run faster and tackle harder.
Right, you get hyped up.
Exactly. But when you step onto the global stage against a team like Germany, you are facing a machine. You are facing players who have been in highly structured professional tactical environments since they were like 8 years old. So what happens at minute 60 of that match?
Well, the amateur players start getting tired.
Exactly. The lactic acid builds up.
Right.
And when an amateur player gets exhausted, they rely on emotion. They might make a rash, high-energy tackle and step 3 yards out of their defensive position to chase the ball.
Oh, I see.
A professional German team doesn't play with emotion. They play with geometry. They mathematically exploit those 3 empty yards. They pass the ball into the pocket of space the Argentine player just vacated.
Wow.
So that 11-0 loss wasn't a lack of heart at all. It was the brutal reality of an amateur defense physically losing its tactical shape and a professional machine just ruthlessly picking them apart.
Wow. Okay, that frames the 2019 World Cup in a completely different light because 2019 really feels like the watershed moment for Albiceleste.
It definitely is.
The team had been revived after that 2016 shutdown. They scraped their way through a playoff against Panama just to qualify. And this is the tournament where you finally see that raw emotional grit start to merge with actual baseline professional experience.
The 2019 World Cup is fundamentally where the modern identity of this team is forged. It is where they stopped being just a story of neglect and started becoming a real tactical problem for other nations.
Yeah. The drama in this tournament is basically cinematic. In their opening match, they face Japan. Japan are former World Cup champions. They are exactly the kind of highly technical, disciplined squad that usually picks an amateur team apart, like we just talked about.
Yeah, the geometry team.
Exactly. And Argentina manages a shocking 0-0 draw. It is their first ever point earned in a Women's World Cup.
And a 0-0 draw against Japan means you didn't just run hard. It means you held your shape. You stayed disciplined for the full 90 minutes. But the match that truly defines their evolution came later in the group stage against Scotland.
If you, listening right now, want to know what this team is made of, look at the Scotland game. With just 25 minutes left on the clock, Argentina is down 3-0.
That's a huge deficit.
In a World Cup, for a team that has historically struggled, that is usually the moment the floodgates open. That is exactly the scenario where an 11-0 happens. The team gets demoralized, the shape completely falls apart, and the opponent just runs up the score.
The historical precedent completely dictated that they should have collapsed right then and there.
But they didn't. They storm back. They score 3 goals in the final quarter of the match to secure a thrilling 3-3 draw. I mean, they didn't advance from the group stage, but they finished with 2 draws and 1 narrow 1-0 loss to England.
And you have to look at the cultural impact of that performance back home. The sources note that this was deemed a massive, massive turning point. People in Argentina started paying real attention.
Finally.
Yeah, and part of that was actually because the men's side had just come off some very public, disappointing showings at the 2018 World Cup and the 2019 Copa America.
So the public saw the women's team basically bleeding for the shirt. They saw a resilience that was undeniable. And that 2019 resilience has recently evolved into something much more dangerous on the pitch. They aren't just relying on emotional comebacks anymore. They are developing cold, hard, tactical discipline.
Yes, if we look at the tactical report on the recent form leading toward the 2027 World Cup, it reveals a completely different Argentina. The days of wild, unpredictable swings are seemingly over.
Under their current head coach, Germán Portanova, the team has found real structural defensive solidity. I want to look at their recent 5-match unbeaten run across South American competition, but I don't want to just read the scores. In these 5 matches against fierce rivals like Chile, Venezuela, Colombia, Peru, and Ecuador, they didn't blow teams away. They didn't go out and score 4 goals a game.
No, they did something much more sustainable. They strangled the games.
Here's where it gets really interesting. In those last 5 matches combined, they only conceded 2 goals. 2. They went away to Chile and won 1-0. They played a very strong Colombian team and ground out a 0-0 draw. They went away to Ecuador and won 1-0. This is a massive structural shift from the team that used to leak goals the moment they got tired.
If we connect this to the bigger picture, you have to understand that successful international tournament football is almost entirely built on defense. The tactical report highlights that these 1-0 away wins aren't lucky breaks. They are the result of playing what we call a low block and maintaining an incredibly compact shape.
Break that down for us. What does it actually mean to play a compact shape against a highly attacking team like, say, Colombia?
It means denying space between your players. When an attacking team wants to score, they look for gaps between the midfielders and the defenders to thread a pass.
Right.
Portanova has drilled this Argentina team to move as a single connected unit. If the ball moves left, the entire team shifts left, keeping the distances between themselves very small, maybe just 10 or 15 yards between the forward line and the defensive line.
Like a moving wall.
Exactly like a wall. They force the opponent to pass out wide, away from the dangerous central areas. It requires immense concentration. You can't just run. You have to think constantly for 90 minutes.
So when they played Colombia and the Argentine attack maybe wasn't clicking that day, they didn't panic. They just stayed in that compact block, frustrated the Colombian attackers, and ensured they walked away with a point in a 0-0 draw. They held their nerve.
The ability to win tight, ugly 1-0 games on the road in hostile environments shows that they are no longer just surviving matches and hoping for a miracle. They are actively managing the tempo of the game. They are displaying high-pressure confidence.
And this specific run of form secured them second place in the CONMEBOL Women's Nations League. CONMEBOL being the South American Football Confederation, of course. And securing that second place officially guarantees their qualification for the 2027 FIFA Women's World Cup.
Which is huge.
They punched their ticket not with flashy offense, but by being a team that is incredibly difficult to break down.
And you absolutely have to credit the veteran leadership driving this era. You cannot execute a disciplined defensive system without leaders on the pitch who command respect. You have their captain, defender, Aldana Kameri. She currently holds the record for the most appearances for the national team with 108 caps.
Wow.
She is the literal anchor of that new defensive solidity.
We really need to pause on that number. Earning 108 caps for your national team is an incredible achievement for any player, anywhere. But think about what it physically and mentally means for a woman in the Argentine system to earn 108 caps. This is a player who was there when they were amateurs.
Yeah.
She was there when the team was literally defunded and ceased to exist in 2016. The sheer endurance required to stick around, to keep training on your own, to fight the Federation for basic rights, and to still show up and play 108 international matches. That is staggering.
It transforms a statistic into a story of incredible human endurance. And on the other end of the pitch, you have Florencia Bonsegundo. She is their all-time top goal scorer with 27 goals.
Right.
When you are playing a tight defensive system that relies on keeping the score 0-0, you need someone with a ruthless cutting edge who can snatch a goal out of nowhere to secure that 1-0 win. That is exactly what Bonsegundo provides.
Having players with that level of international experience is exactly what bridges the gap we talked about earlier. They have lived through the dark history of the program, and now they are the ones executing the modern professional tactics.
They are the bridge between the amateur past and the professional future.
It really is an incredible arc. So let's step back and look at what this all means for you listening right now. Why should you care about Albiceleste? Because whether you are a football fan or not, this team is a masterclass in absolute resilience. They went from literally not existing in 2016, from being completely ignored by their own governing body, to earning their first World Cup point in 2019, to now punching their ticket to the 2027 World Cup with a highly disciplined, tactical identity.
It is a profound reminder that when the system doesn't support you and when you are forced to operate in the shadows, you don't just wait for a handout. You focus entirely on your own foundation. You build your own grit, you forge your own tactical discipline, and you survive until you become absolutely impossible for the system to ignore.
Which brings us to a final thought for you to mull over. We talked heavily about the shadow of the men's team. Well, when the Argentine men's team won the 2022 World Cup in Qatar, the pressure on the women's team suddenly skyrocketed.
The expectations became immense and, honestly, arguably unfair. The public wanted the women to replicate that global dominance immediately without acknowledging the decades of missing infrastructure.
And unfortunately, the 2023 Women's World Cup was a stumble. The sources show they finished last in their group. They lost 1-0 to Italy, 2-0 to Sweden, and drew 2-2 with South Africa. It seemed like the sheer weight of the men's victory, combined with the world's expectations, just momentarily crushed them.
Yeah, it was a tough tournament for them.
But now, looking ahead to 2027, the landscape is different.
Radically different. They have a domestic professional league that has had nearly a decade to mature now. They have a coach in Portanova who has installed a distinct, repeatable defensive identity. They aren't relying on miracles anymore.
So the question to leave you with is this. With this newfound tactical maturity and a ticket already punched, could the 2027 World Cup finally be the moment? Could this be the tournament where the women's team stops fighting just to prove they deserve to be in the room, steps completely out of the men's shadow, and builds a global football legacy entirely their own?
They have certainly laid the concrete foundation to make it happen. The rest will be decided on the pitch.
We'll be watching.